Hi, and welcome to another episode of Marriage on a Tightrope. I'm Katie.
I'm Allan.
And we're still married. This is going to be one of the best interviews we have ever done, and I am so excited for all of you to listen to it. But before we get to that, we just have a couple of announcements. The first one being that July 28th is our next workshop on a tightrope, and we are sold out. I don't want to say sold out, but we are
capacity.
Full. That's right. And it happened in just a matter of a couple weeks. So we've put some feelers out there to see if any of you would like to have us hold a September session, and there seems to be quite a bit of interest. So watch for information coming up on that so that you don't miss out on another session of our workshop.
We'll mention it here when registration's open for that. We expect it to be open. Today is July 14th, probably within the next 2 weeks. So follow us on Instagram, join our Facebook group, or listen to the podcast, or any of the above, or all of the above, and you'll catch wind of when that's going to happen. Today
we interviewed Carol Lynn Pearson, and if that name rings a bell, it should, because she has done a lot within the church.
Ooh, let's harmonize her most popular song. If you don't look as most people do.
Okay, that's good. I think
that one. Everyone should know what that is. Just to be clear, that was not me trying my best to sound good.
Sure. We'll go with that. Well, we talked with her. It was an excellent interview, and I think it'll just resonate so much with how all of you feel. She had so many wonderful, insightful things to say. At the end of the interview, we learned that she will be releasing a new book. It is called Finding Mother God, Poems to Heal the World. And it will be released in the next 3 weeks, she said. You can find that on carolynnpearson.com, or you can go to Amazon to order the book.
Yeah, we would recommend using her website if you can, carolynnpearson.com, because she autographs it for you, which is fantastic. It's wonderful. So make sure you go there to purchase. All of her works are available on her website.
Yeah, and you know what else she told us is that she's going to be reading the poems herself, and it will be available on Audible. So if you would like to listen to it, you can do that as well. We didn't want to... we wanted to make sure to get all this information in so that you knew about it, because once you listen to this interview, I am sure you're going to want to read whatever it is she has written, because she is just such a lovely person, and I wish she lived closer so we could take her to lunch.
She's all the way in California. Yeah, with this interview, we just tried to stay out of her way as much as we could, because she just speaks with such power and passion. So we hope that you feel just as uplifted as we did having just spoken with her, and we hope you enjoy the interview with Carol Lynn Pearson. We are now beyond pleasured. What is a word that would describe beyond pleasure?
Elated.
We are elated to be joined, but I should be asking her what the word would be.
Ecstatic. Let's be ecstatic.
We are ecstatic. We are elated. Absolutely, to have Carol Lynn Pearson join us on Marriage on a Tightrope. Carol Lynn, thank you so much, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I am honored to be invited to your show. Great to meet you.
Good to meet you as well. So for those that don't know who Carol Lynn Pearson is, we're going to talk about a lot of your works, Carol Lynn, here today. You're a poet, you're an author, a playwright, a screenwriter, a performer, a speaker, a philosopher. I mean, you contribute a whole lot in this space. I think it would be awesome to introduce you by talking a little bit about some of your works. Our listeners may be a little confused. This is a mixed faith marriage podcast. Carol Lynn, are you in a mixed faith marriage at the moment?
Indeed not. I am not in any marriage at the moment.
So, I mean, that's a double strike. Why are you on this podcast?
Oh, no.
I think it'll make a whole lot of sense why you're here. You know, looking through your body of work, I can just share personally, I think most people's experience with your work, especially our age demographic, Katie and I being old millennials, we're still clinging on to that young group, 38 and 39 years old at the moment, that our first exposure was to the wonderful primary song, I'll Walk With You. And that was my first inkling of seeing your name there in the primary hymn book. I remember going to Carolyn, my wife and Katie and I met on the mission in Spain. And I remember somebody gave me a CD of My Turn on Earth. And I had never heard it before the mission. And I started listening to it and I was like, wow, this is classically 70s music and very fun.
It is.
So I know that many people here will be familiar with some of your work as well. But
I also on the mission, we found like a reel of film, and the elders and we decided one preparation day to watch My Turn on Earth because they had it in the closet. And by the end, all of us were crying, and the elders are like, "What type of movie is this? Who found this movie?" It was just great. So I
love that little story.
Yeah, we did too.
So Carolyn, if you could talk about My Turn on Earth. Who was the target? Who did you write it for, and what were you hoping to convey to that demographic?
Yes. Well, Lexi Azevedo and I, the musician, had already written a play together, a musical called The Order is Love, which it should be much more well-known than it is because it's a really fine musical. But, the church is not doing plays and musicals anymore. That's one of the sad things. That was about the saints living the United Order. And we had a great time. It was premiered at BYU, had a fabulous response. And then a few years later, Lex said, we need to do something for children. And I had already written something that I thought could be just a little children's picture book. And I called it My Turn on Earth. And it was just, the basics really of what that story is about. So I expanded that into a broader presentation and gave it to Lex. He said, this is great. Let's just do it. So, and of course, I was firstly involved in wanting to do that, to find fun ways to teach children why we're here in life in the first place and how to live so as to make that successful. And so dramatically, the whole idea, which we fleshed out, was starting out there in the pre-existence and coming down here. And I really, I think, successfully used the little symbols of children's games in order to get across some of the ideas that we need. So the overriding structure is that we're here on a treasure hunt, and we've got to find the treasure before we go back to heaven, where our king and queen, our father and mother in heaven are. And so everything here is about finding the treasure. And of course, at the end, Barbara has to go home. And
poor Barbara.
I know.
It's sad.
I know, it is. It is sad. And she thinks she has not found the treasure because she's given it all away to people along the way. And then she realizes, and she's told, and I hear these wonderful little notes that come down from heaven of things that Jesus has said, that she found the treasure precisely by giving away everything that she had to people who needed it more. So, that play had a wonderful run, semi-professionally, when we were allowed to advertise in the church. And I understand why commercially that was no longer possible. But a lot of people have come to love My Turn on Earth.
So, Carolyn, that feeling and sentiment of finding the treasures, is that the same type of philosophy you used when you were raising your children? Well,
I hope so. I do hope so. We, when Gerald was with us, we had great family home evenings, great fun. He was more fun than I ever could possibly be. But, and then when I was on my own with them, I just focused on, so what did Jesus say about this? And someone just reminded me not long ago that But I remember I must have mentioned in one of my books that there was when my kids were small here, well, 10, 12, whatever, a neighbor boy stole our Christmas lights. And I remember I sat them down and said, okay, what did Jesus tell us to do about this? And we talked about, is it possible to, okay, he said to return good for evil. Can we do that? Well, first of all, my daughter stomped up to his house because she knew who did it and demanded the lights back, and she got them back. But then we did talk about it, and we said, this boy seems to have a problem. He needs more light in his life. So I said, why don't we just give him a surprise gift? Let's put a little money together. You can get a quarter or whatever. And how about we buy him a flashlight? And we just put it with his name on it up on the porch. Don't say who it's from. And we'll know that in this case, we did something as best we could with what Jesus told us to return good for evil. And my kids remember us doing things like that.
That's great. That's a
beautiful example.
Really good example. Carol Lynn, one interesting part of a mixed faith marriage is how do you teach kids, right? If there is one spouse listening today that no longer has a belief in the divinity of Christ, for example, and another spouse still holds very strongly to that divinity, how can you still teach those very valuable lessons that you just explained? And this past Sunday, we were able to have a really beautiful home church, which we've been having for about 6 months longer than the church dictated for, because that's kind of the compromise that we came to was one Sunday a month, we're going to stay home and do church at home so that we could all have a good Sunday experience together when I don't feel terribly comfortable going every Sunday. So, and yeah, the lesson that you just taught would have fit in perfectly with our lesson was gaining strength through failure, where the example that we gave, and it was really cool that I felt like I could actually be the one to talk through the story, was the woman in casting the first stone, and what he says to her, what Christ says to her after the would have been stoners, interesting way of putting it, but the would have been stoners walked away, as he said, "Go thy way and sin no more." He didn't guilt her. He didn't excuse what she had done, but he said, essentially, he gave her the flashlight. He gave her the flashlight to give her that permission to go and live her life. And I don't know, that I think that's a valuable lesson. What do you think about that specific story there in the Bible?
That particular story, I don't know that I have anything really to contribute. I mean, Jesus certainly did the thing that he preached that we should all do, and so that's a wonderful example. But so I was thinking of what can a couple do similarly to the story that I told, if one of them no longer looks on Christ as this particularly unusually spiritual, unique figure with all of the metaphysical, beautiful stuff that a lot of people do. That, I think there's a way to work around that beautifully. Even if you no longer, and I haven't read all the books like the historical Christ and various things, that place Christ in a very different context than the sacred, unusual kind of thing that we talk about. But nevertheless, because Jesus brought the most significantly helpful teachings that would, if everybody in the world acted on the teachings that Jesus brought, never mind where they came from, never mind anything about his spiritual status or his resurrection or anything like that, but to acknowledge that somehow or other, this amazingly beautiful man brought us everything we need to have peace on earth. everything we need to have peace in our family. And then one could also add, and Jesus wasn't the only one who brought similar kinds of teachings. In fact, I think it'd be a wonderful family lesson to get on the internet and print off copies of the golden rule in every major religion. And that's easy to find. Just Google that exact phrase, golden rule in all religions. You'll find about 20 religions listed with the differing phraseology for that thought. So I think you could succeed in saying Jesus is the one that is closest to our understanding. And so we speak of him and we're grateful for what he taught. And the things that he taught were also brought by other wonderful luminaries that were sent to different people from heaven. Or not even from heaven, if we don't want to talk about heaven, that wise people all throughout history have come up with similar kinds of concepts. And Jesus is the one that we speak of the most. And Jesus would be thrilled to sit down with these other 20 people who said the same thing he did in little different words.
Who are some of those luminaries in your life that have spoken to you? Some of those other luminaries that have inspired you?
I love to read Eckhart Tolle. And last night, when I got up in the middle of the night and couldn't go back to sleep, I picked up his book for 10 minutes. And I love the way he puts things. And I also have studied a great deal of A Course in Miracles. And it would take too long to explain about that. But that's a channeled work. And Marianne Williamson is the one who's been the major spokeswoman, well known for that work. But Byron Katie is somebody that I have studied who brings in, how to live in the moment, as Eckhart Tolle is also teaching. So I read whoever comes into my space that seems to have something to offer me. And there are a lot of luminaries.
The listeners can't see this. This is a Zoom meeting, but if you look at what we're looking at, you can see just lots of books on both bookshelves and boxes of papers. And so I can imagine that this has been a lifelong pursuit for you to read and to understand and to think and to create some of these own ideas and in your own life and in your own mind.
Oh yes, I won't live long enough to be able to read and study and think and write all the things that I want to. But we're rich. We're rich in the availability of so many fine thinkers, and of course we're awash also in a lot of stuff that makes no difference whatsoever. That takes up our space and our time. Mm-hmm. So we do have to be careful to choose more highly than just live in the bottom rung.
Most definitely. Well, this being a marriage podcast, perhaps if you would be so kind to allow us to speak of your marriage, listening to your interview on some other podcasts and speaking about your marriage with Gerald, I couldn't help but think of any parallels when differences arise. What do you do? How do you treat it? Where can growth be found? And the love that so clearly existed throughout all of Gerald's life with you guys. Can you talk a little bit about that experience with Gerald? I know I'm asking a question of, hey, can you summarize 40 years of your life in 3 minutes? Could be a little bit difficult, but if you could talk about that, yeah, Katie.
But also, having said that too, it's painful. When Allan transitioned out of the church, it was extremely painful for me And so maybe you could also talk to some of that pain that you felt, or, how you were able to work through some of that.
For those who don't know anything about my story, let me just quickly give it. In 1966, Gerald Pearson and I married in the Salt Lake Temple, and he had already told me that he had had homosexual experience and attractions, but that's not who he was. And he did love me the very best he could. I know that. And see, we were very ill-informed in the 60s, and the church was just simply there with a statement: if you get off track in any of these ways, you just repent. You've made an evil choice. You just get back on track, do all the right things, marry a good woman who loves you, and you'll be just fine. And boy, there have been hundreds, thousands of men who acted on that, and generally it does not work out very well at all. So that's what we did, and Gerald realized soon that his hope has not been fulfilled, that inside, in the way he experienced himself, he was still a homosexual man. But we did have a good marriage in so many ways. And then we had 4 children, and he didn't want to disrupt our family. He loved the kids, he loved me. But when we realized that everything was on the table, and he knew, and I knew that he was not going to be able to maintain in the marriage under the contract that we had made. And we spent 2 years in hell in Provo, and then 2 years in hell in Walnut Creek, California, trying to find a way to salvage the marriage. And we determined finally to divorce and remain friends, which we were able to do. And we still kept quite a good family unit going. And then 6 years after that, Gerald passed away from AIDS in 1984. And the last part of his time, he was here in this house where I still live, where I was taking care of him. And he and I never, ever, ever talked about the idea that I would write our story. It was just too shameful. But soon after his passing, I realized that, and the early and mid 80s was just a horrendous time for young men to be dying on the sidewalks of San Francisco and New York and even Salt Lake City, I'm sure, thrown away by their families, thrown away by their church, essentially. So I knew that I could, that Gerald and I had learned so much together, and I had learned so much about the phenomenon of sexuality, that I could make a contribution if I dared to, and that was terribly frightening. But to shorten all this, I did get an agent, and he sold the book to Random House in New York. And so Goodbye, I Love You was published in 86, 2 years after the death. And it had a very large and positive reception. I wasn't sure how it would happen in Mormondom, but I was really so pleasantly surprised to see the tremendous positive response I got in Mormondom. Certainly from people who had some kind of interest personally in a family situation or for themselves, but even from people who had no investment in the subject at all and just knew that they needed to learn about this. So that is how that book happened, and that opened the door for me to do a lot of work with our LGBT people. And that's that part of it. Now, to your question about how you felt when you saw this handsome dude beside you pulling away from the church. Of course, I had to go through that when we were still in Provo, and I knew that Gerald was wrestling so much about his beliefs in the church and trying to figure out. And so, if the church is true, I'm wrong. I'm totally wrong. There's no way I can coordinate this. And once he said to me, the problem is, I love the church, but the church detests me. Mm. And he went into tremendous study of church history. And he discovered all the things most of the things that people are discovering now that bring them to what we call a faith crisis. And I was aware of all of those things. I read things with him, but I did not have any interest myself in pulling away from the church. And to see him do that was very, very scary for me. And in my case, I think it would be double, triple, quadruple as scary as perhaps it happened for you, Katie, because to me it was part and parcel of being out of the church meant embracing the homosexuality. So, but in the early part of our having to figure out things that he felt one way about the church, I felt another way. Just a little while ago, I remembered a poem that I wrote a long time ago, and I pulled this book out, and I'd like to read this for you because I think it addresses, the less radical schisms that come between couples. It's called The Valentine. I loved the Valentines we made in school. I never cut the hearts out flat. The two sides would never match for me. I always folded and centered and scissored out half a heart that opened into perfect symmetry. So they never had a side that was fat and a side that was skinny. I loved them for that. It felt sort of nice and tidy that way. The day we saw the shape of our being one, as if it had opened from some good design that made two matching halves, yours and mine. But I find we don't stay put like paper. We are not comfortable with glue. Your edges have shifted, stretched, and mine have too, but not to a pattern. If we folded our halves up today, they would not fit. Occasionally, I itch for the scissors, I will admit. Oh, well, I will put away childish things, cut them off like braids. We are no Valentine, you and I. We are something so alive, so moving, so growing. I cannot yet put a name to the shape. I only know it goes on and on and on, pressing toward whatever border there may somewhere be. Your center and mine are one. And between the halves, there is flow. That is much. I will let the edges go. And I think that kind of perception would work well for a lot of couples. And that worked well for me. But, for me and for, I'm sure, some of the couples that we're talking to now, there will come an issue that is so large that the whole paradigm has to shift. And so it was with us. Gerald and I had to shift out of marriage into friendship. But we still loved each other. And Gerald was never unkind to me. And I was not unkind to him. We both were just riddled with pain. But, and for those who do not have something so huge, that the marriage just cannot survive. I think there's a lot of wisdom in believing. I should never have thought that you would stay exactly the way you were when I fell in love with you. I've done some changing, and change, if change is growth, then it's awesome. You know, if change is not growth, then it can be really troublesome. But if there is a strong center there, and if there is even a good center that may not be strong, I think it can be strengthened by a couple simply saying, you know, your part of our Valentine has gotten really weird, and mine is really weird to you also. But I still love you in so many ways, and I feel that you love me in so many ways. And now we have children, and they need us both. So now, you know, if we can figure out the romantic love stuff in a way that sort of still works for us, and bring in the Christ-like love stuff to nourish it when it's kind of fallen apart, I think that's doable. I think that so many LDS couples who are experiencing this kind of challenge, if there is enough in the relationship, and certainly the presence of children is enough. It may not be the final enough sometimes if a situation is extreme. But if the relationship has good things still going for it, I do not believe it's a wise choice to let religion come between. You know, and there are a lot of couples now who are faced, you know, we are so different politically, I can hardly stand. We have nothing to talk about. And maybe it's the same kind of thing, even though maybe the LDS circumstances is different, because for the truly still 100% believing spouse, the stakes are so seemingly high. It's my eternal path. If we can't be together in what we have come to call the covenant path here, I won't be able to be with you in the next life. And that makes me just extremely sad, because we don't know what's going on in eternity. You know, I have just thrown away so many things that, this is, you know, here we've got these 3 degrees of glory. Here we've got these 3 divisions of the highest kingdom. I've just thrown that away. I don't know how things are going to work out, and I don't believe anybody does. I think we have this wonderful, long, eons after eons, experience after experiences, the opportunity to keep growing and learning, and exactly how that will look, I don't know. But people better and smarter than me, let's call them our Father and Mother in heaven, let's call it God, let's call it whatever anybody wants to call the source, the ground zero of wherever we came from and might show up again to. Let's just give them more credit for planning something that will feel correct to all of us. And, you know, for one partner to be frightened by a home teacher who would say, you know, if your spouse is not going to be able to be with you in heaven, you really better think about getting a new one here. And I know there have been cases where that has happened, and I think that's wicked, really, really wicked. So,
Carolyn, I find you kind of radical, because, and I'm saying that in a very positive way, because I think that those of our listeners listening have a hard time with family members who are in their 50s, 60s, but also parents who are in their 70s and 80s who grow up with this thought and notion that if you don't have a spouse to take you to the celestial kingdom, you will not get there, right? And so a lot of couples in our position are really struggle with the things that just their own family tells them, and people you know all across the board in different generations will tell them. And how do you combat that?
Well, they could be entirely right. I could be totally wrong. I could be set for the lowest level of the celestial kingdom.
I'll see you there.
But I'm willing to risk that, because I honestly, I think if we choose love over everything else, everything doctrinal, everything frightening about, this is what we're told, and if you don't do this, just choose love. You can't. Nobody can see what I'm wearing. A sweatshirt now. It's of course it's hot, but it was cool when I woke up, and I love this. I bought this to support an organization in the Middle East, a peacekeeping organization, and the words on this sweatshirt are "Love anyway." And no matter what happens, we can love anyway. And as we know, for some of the couples, there will be a division. That's just what is going to happen. But even so, that can be done with love. In fact, I think I would advise somebody it's not possible, but I had a strong sense that I was not to let Gerald go until I could let him go with love. So I just urge everyone to focus on love rather than anybody's specific, hierarchical, authoritative doctrine. Let Jesus himself be our guide. And he's going to tell you, he'll say, love anyway. Love the stranger at the gate. Love your enemy. Love everybody. You can't go wrong with that. And it just saddens me that love relationships, especially when a family's involved, especially when children are involved, that some of these technicalities, and yes, I call some of the doctrine technicalities. They're not the essence. The essence we know because Jesus has said it is so, and he's backed up by every luminary that you can find in every other religion. Jesus has said, and that's good enough for me, love everybody. And certainly that means love your spouse who has opened up new doors in their thinking. If that new thinking is causing you real pain in terms of some terrible actions that spouse has turned to, that's a whole different thing. But if your spouse is still kind and loving and devoted and determined to be a good father or mother, I think you have no business judging that person harshly because of the technicality of doctrine.
Carol Lynn, can you tell us how you and Gerald were able to love your children and teach them love when you were maybe on different planes of thinking?
Our children never saw us be unkind to each other. They never saw us fight. Of course, Gerald and I had a lot of, intense, painful, weeping conversations that they were not privy to. And they were surprised when we told them that we were going to end the marriage. But we did it in such a way that they knew that we still loved each other and that there was a way in which we still would be family. And, you know, as things progressed and as Gerald's life became more involved in his new world, there was a lot that I had to give up, you know, in terms of our being the kind of unit that I would have wanted. But our children always knew that their father loved them deeply.
Can I go back to your sweatshirt?
Oh yeah, love anyway.
Love anyway. It's funny because even though you're wearing it, we can't see the words. So when you said love anyway, I thought of two things. And now you're standing up to show us. I love it. It's great. She did it. We just had a Carol Lynn Pearson shimmy.
Love me anyway.
Yeah, and I took two meanings of that. Not being able to see how the word anyway was spaced. I heard your words and thought, like, love regardless, just love anyway,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
And then the second one, I took it as there was a space in between any and way, of just love any way you can, right? The kind of subtle little difference between the two things.
Right. Yeah.
Now, one of the works. Go ahead.
Oh, that's valid too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the most well-known works that we've already mentioned is "I'll Walk with You," the song that you wrote for the primary hymn book. And I know that you have a new children's book out by the same title, and we would love if you would honor us with reading that book in its entirety.
Oh, I would love to do that.
We would think that would just be a delight for us and for our listeners.
Sure. And the book that we're speaking of here is called "I'll Walk with You." And many of you will recognize this as the title of a song that I wrote. Well, I was requested to write this song 40 years ago when the new primary, the then new primary songbook came out. And they called me, and I had become something of a well-known person because of the success that my dear queer husband Gerald insisted that we publish a book of poems of mine called Beginnings. And that really made me a household name for quite a while in Mormondom. And so I was called by the primary general board they asked me if I would write a lyric that they needed badly before they could send their new book to press. And it would be for children who feel left out, for children who are different, for children who are handicapped in one way or another. And I said, well, I will try. So I wrote this lyric, and they had a fine musician read nibbly to the music. And this has become a real favorite of songs in primary. And even we sing it sometimes in my Relief Society, and sometimes they ask me to lead the music. Years ago, my stake president, two different times, asked me to lead a small primary chorus singing "I'll Walk with You" when general authorities were visiting. He'd love to show this off. So, and anyway, last year, the publisher of Gibbs Smith that I worked with quite a few books called and said, would you consider taking that little primary song and extending it to a children's picture book? And remembering that in my contract with the church, I had kept commercial rights to the lyrics. I felt that I could do that. And so I created this little book that you are now going to hear. And this is available on Amazon. It's also available from my personal website if you want me to sign a copy of the book to you, to your children, to whatever. Okay, here we go. If you don't walk as most people do, some people walk away from you. But I won't. I won't. I'll walk beside and match your stride. That's how I'll show my love for you. If you don't talk as most people do, some people talk and laugh at you. but I won't. I won't. I'll talk with you and giggle too. That's how I'll show my love for you. If you don't look like some people do, some people just look down on you. But I won't. I won't. I will see you're made perfectly. That's how I'll show my love for you. If you're not as young as some are young, some people think you're just no fun, but I won't. I won't. I'll listen to and learn from you. That's how I'll show my love for you. If you were born far, far away, some people think you should not stay, but I won't. I won't. I know you bring such interesting things. That's how I'll show my love for you. If you don't pray as some people pray, some people pray you'll go away, but I won't. I won't. We're all, I see, one family. That's how I'll show my love for you. If you can't buy expensive stuff, some people think you're not good enough, but I won't. I won't. I'll look inside where treasures hide. That's how I'll show my love for you. If you don't love as some people do, some people think your love's not true, but I won't. I won't. I'll watch you share. I'll see you care. That's how I'll show my love for you. If you don't think as some people do, some people have no use for you, but I will. I will. Our thoughts will play and stay all day. That's how I'll show my love for you. I'll walk with you and talk with you. That's how I'll show my love for you.
Thank you very much. So, Carol Lynn, can I just say, I don't know. Hopefully, you'll know by the end of this tear-filled editorial that those words ring true for a lot more reasons than maybe you originally intended. That last verse of "if you don't think like most people do," that's something that those that A, experience a transition in beliefs, and B, those that are now in a mixed faith marriage, we struggle so much with. We struggle with all of a sudden some of our best friends, some of our family, some of our neighbors, they don't want to talk to us anymore. And that can be really difficult. So hearing those words come from you, there's a reason why that song has crossed boundaries of belief. There's a reason why that song is sung at Love Loud. There's a reason we were there for it last year, and oh my gosh, it broke and put my heart back together. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
So thank you from the bottom of my cold, dead, apostate heart.
You know what? I believe Jesus loves your cold, dead, apostate heart.
I like to think so too. Katie had an example.
I was talking with a friend of mine who they are good friends. They're LGBTQ activists. They're allies. They're full-fledged members, and they also are BLM supporters. And
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter, yes. And so I mentioned to her that we were going to be doing this interview, and she sent me a picture of her and her daughters, and they had been at a rally for both LGBTQ and for Black Lives Matter, and they had a poster, and I'll have to send you this picture because it's beautiful, and they have music notes in the corner on either side, and it said, "I'll march with you." And Yeah, and I was so glad that she sent it to me in preparation for this interview, because I thought that was really very beautiful of her and her daughters, and I think that the message carries across so many different genres and religions and people of all kind. And so we are actually so excited and grateful for this book that we want to give it away. So, Allan, do you want to explain that?
Yeah, what we would like to do is, if you're listening here and you would like a chance to win one of the we're going to give away 5 copies of the book. And we'll purchase it via your website, Carol Lynn, and we'd love to get it autographed for the folks that are going to be winners here. But what we'd like to do is have all those listeners spread this message, spread the "I'll walk with you" message by posting on Instagram or posting on Facebook using the hashtag "I'll walk with you," and just share how you are embodying this philosophy of loving anyway.
Yeah, and tag us at Marriage on a Tightrope, and we'll give 5 copies away that Carol Lynn signs. So
yeah, I think it'll be easiest on Instagram. If you tag us on Instagram with that hashtag "I'll walk with you," we would love to highlight some of those responses as well, just to share this positive message. And then within the next week or two, we'll pick a few winners and submit the order. So, Carolina, as we go to the next section of this interview, it certainly is tied to what we just talked about. A lot of times, and I am actually one of the examples of this, a lot of times the belief changes, but you don't want to distance yourself physically from the church, right? Just knowing your story as well, you've experienced some of this. You've kept some things very close, and you've even shared today how you've pushed away some things that you just aren't of value to you anymore. And yet you've remained to my estimation, a trusted voice from within. What advice could you give to those listeners that are listening that even though their beliefs have changed, they want to remain a part in a completely active role within the church? That's not everybody. Some people are saying, nope, I'm out, peace out, not going to happen. But for those that do want to, how can that balance be struck? Or how have you had success doing that?
Everybody will find their own path. But there are a few things that I would suggest. And that's just to... If you want to be a part of the community, just show up. Show up brightly. Don't show up and skulk on the back row and complain and leave because you don't want to talk to anybody. If you have made the decision you want to participate in the church, and there are so many valid ways I think that people might wish to participate while they still have, all of these things going on. Oh, I can't stand polygamy and blah, 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 blah. All of those things. I don't think you have to be 100% true believer in every possible thing about the church in order to want to be an authentic part of the community. Mm. And so I would say if you do want to be a part of the community, surprise everybody by how brightly you shine when you happen to be in the room with all these true believing Mormons, and surprise them to show up, at all of, the service projects and the this and the that. And, this is the same thing that I tell gay people. But when, I don't want to go home for Christmas, my parents are not, da-da-da. I say, listen, you go home for Christmas and you stun your family. You surprise them with how brightly you shine in front of them. Because they're going to think, oh, here's my son who's chosen a dark, evil path. And they're going to expect to see you be a dark kind of person. Stun them by being brighter, kinder, more loving than they ever saw you before. That's how you want to do that when you go home as a gay person for Christmas. And similarly, I think for the person who maybe members of the word know that you're major questioning. Maybe they know that you've really given up on the absolute truth claims, but they see that you want to be there anyway. And of course, you can't do things that will obviously try to pull somebody else away from their beliefs. But to just be there, and even if you're not even given a calling, make your own ways to serve. Look around and say, oh, here's somebody that needs something that I have for them. Do it. The bishop will be impressed. And you're not doing it just to impress the bishop. But as you do this, the people in your ward who might have suspicions about you will say, gosh, I thought when somebody, kind of loses their complete testimony about the one and only true church, I thought, that means they're kind of going to be in the gutter next time I see them. They'll be drunk and they'll be smoking and they'll be all of this stuff. Surprise them. Show them that you're an even stronger, happier, more giving person than they thought you were before. I think that's the very best thing you can possibly do.
Amen, sister. Yeah. Sorry, I know you have a question. No, I just wanted to say, that reminds me of the song This Is Me from The Greatest Showman, who the punchline of the song, or one of the good lines of the song, is just, look out, because here I come. This is who I am. This is who I'm meant to be. This is me. I'm going to show up anyway. And that's a great message. And I think that it takes courage. It absolutely takes courage. But man, it is, there's a tendency, and I editorialize a lot, and Katie helps me stop. So stop me when I need to. But there's a tendency to get in this rut of, why isn't anyone knocking on my door? Like, just because they believe differently, nobody's going to come over and no one's going to talk to me and no one's going to knock on the... Stop it. Go knock on their door. If you want to build relationships and build friendships and maintain friendships, don't throw yourself a pity party. Go and knock on their door. Go invite them over to your house. Invite them to the hot tub. Invite them to eat the brisket. Invite them to do this. Invite them to do that. Take it upon yourself.
Absolutely. And not with any underhanded motive that I'm going to figure out how to tell you, why the book of Abraham is da-da-da-da-da-da.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
So you can't try to convert them. They would like to reframe your belief system. But if those things are put away, and we have two people here, or two families, who are just such good people with such good hearts, who want to bless each other, who want to bless the world, there's no reason that one's activity in the church should come between these families having a happy experience together.
I can't believe I'm the one that's going to say this.
Oh, okay.
This probably should have come from you. But so, I see Allan's effort into coming to church and to being, people looking at him not as the one that's left, but as he's showing up, he's being there, he's supporting our family, he's supporting our community, and he's still loving those people around us, right? But one of the things that I think the cycles and things that are really difficult for him is that, when he does say things that aren't controversial, they're just a different way of looking at it, he is met with such skepticism and really anger from the other members. And it could be just as very benign as possible, but because his feelings doesn't fit the narrative anymore, and he may present a different outlook, it's very difficult to talk about, because he's received poorly. And so for those of us who are still in and members, and what can we do to help open up those lines of communication for those who are trying to stay and to be a positive part of our ward family?
Well, of course, for the for the true believer to open up the circle wide enough. There's that great little poem. What is it? They drew a circle that kept me out. I drew a circle to bring them in. And this pertains to both the believer and the non-believer. We each have to draw a larger circle that will bring in those people. I would certainly suggest to the non-believing person who goes to church, this is not the place for you to insist that everybody hear all your grievances. You don't need to do that. If it's appropriate to say something that you feel is important and might be just a little bit off what most people are thinking, find a way to do it gently and kindly. But when I have never in any church meeting, when I've been speaking at sacrament meeting or when in Relief Society discussions, I've never said anything that would embarrass a teacher. I've never said anything that would cause my bishop to say, "Oh, now what am I going to do about this?" Instead, when one of my subjects is the importance of God the Mother. In the 90s, I wrote and performed a play called Mother Wove the Morning. I hired a theater to make all of my important information known. And when it comes time for church, I will just very gently, if we're having a discussion about God, I will very gently remind the sisters, we're bound by our language, but we have to remember that our Creator is our Heavenly Mother as well as Father. And as far as I can tell, the people in my ward love me. Maybe they're all pretending, but I don't think so.
Oh, I doubt it.
No, never.
And I've been told that they love it when I, just kind of push the envelope a little bit. But I've learned how to do that. Years ago when President Hinckley made the statement that some people have been praying to Heavenly Mother, and no, we're not to do that, and maybe that's before you guys even came on board to notice these kinds of things. But anyway, and I've never been called in like to say, "Oh, we've got to have a council on you" or something. But I've always had good conversations with my bishops and my stake presidents, and I had a good visit with my stake president after that particular thing. And I said, "Listen, I want you to know that I will never say a prayer that would surprise people within the church. I have no need to." What's the word when you take over the airplane and move it somewhere else, to hijack.
Hijack, yeah.
I have no need to hijack a meeting. I will never do that. And he said, "Oh, good. Then I'm asking you to say the opening prayer in state conference next month." So I think I have been very careful about, and I have had bishops thank me for not bringing my particular issues into the church building. Of course, there are always members who seek me out and say, "Oh, I want to talk to you about this and this and this," and we go for a walk, and I'm totally open with them about that. But it's not my place within the walls of the chapel to do anything that would not feel correct to the people who are there, except to be just a little bit here and a little bit there, for which I am thanked.
So, one thing I think about when we talk about, just maybe pushing the envelope, just let them think a little bit, but not going beyond that. I think a little bit about the book that you wrote, The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy. I have to mention it because I think for a lot of women, this is a very, very difficult subject. I've been in meetings where they've completely skipped over it. They just did not talk about it, even though it was in the lesson plan. What were your thoughts in writing that book, and how do we talk about it in a constructive way when it comes to church or Relief Society? Because it is a very emotional subject.
Sure. Well,
you have 20 seconds. I'm just kidding.
So you sort of asked me what brought me to do that.
Yeah.
A lifetime of anger brought me to do that. But as I say on page 1 of the book, I am not angry today as I sit down to begin this book. I have been angry. But I have learned that anger is good as a fuel, but not as a destination. And I think you will agree that that anger does not run through that book. and that my affection for Joseph, as a multi-level, unusual kind of different a person that I can love and also say he made errors, which we know he made errors along the way. So I just knew that that I have a calling in this community to tackle some interesting subjects, and that's why I somehow fate or fortune or heaven or whatever got me together with Gerald Pearson to work all of that out, and the consequence of that is a very valuable contribution to thousands of families who have LGBT members and the gay and lesbian sisters and brothers. And similarly, see, I was born into what we call women's issues, and then I married into gay issues. But what we call women's issues are just, really human issues that affect men every bit as much as they affect women. And it's just been so clear to me the incredible damage that from day one has been the only legacy of LDS polygamy. And so I decided to really learn if what I believed was correct and about the pain that it continues to have. Well, see, over the years, I have received hundreds of letters from Mormon women who found somebody that they could express something to. And I have known about the terrible pain that women feel. If I die before he does, surely he's going to marry in the temple again. And then I'm set for an eternal polygamous marriage, whether I want to or not. That's a terrible thought. And I won't take time to go into the ways this damages men as well. But when I decided to do it, to do something, I sent out a survey and to ask current LDS people, former Mormons, men, women, what they thought of the inequality in the sealing practices and the concept that we still have of eternal polygamy. And on day one, I thought, what was it? More than 1,400. I've forgotten that. A tremendous amount of responses. And by the time we closed it down, we had over 8,000 responses to this, with the huge majority expressing tremendous discomfort with this, and women and men telling their stories. So I spent a whole summer reading through thousands of these little responses, and the pain that was evident is unacceptable, totally unacceptable. So I put together that book with featuring the voices of these women and these men who today, right now, are in unbelievable and insupportable pain, inexcusable pain, because of our ongoing concept of eternal polygamy. And there's a lot of history that's entwined in that. and a lot of my own personal story entwined. But I loved writing that book because I knew it was going to be useful for a lot of people. And so that's how that happened. And I'm very, very often I get an email from a woman or a man who says, I can't tell you how much this has helped me. In fact, this has helped me to stay in the church. I thought if I ever I hate polygamy so much, but I thought if I ever threw it away, I'd have to throw away the whole church. And you've shown me a way I don't have to do that. So really, the church ought to have paid me to write that book. But that's how that book came to be.
Thank you for that context. We want to read. Earlier today we posted in our Facebook group for this podcast that we were going to be interviewing you, and we got a few questions, but also a few comments on this specific topic. One of our good friends, Marie, wrote, "The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy is one of the most interesting and sobering books I've ever read." And then another listener responded with ditto. "That book helped me so much with polygamy. She gave me permission to put it away, and no one ever has."
And isn't it astonishing that we need permission from anybody outside ourselves to say, this is wrong, I'm putting it away. And I remember the struggle that I had to go through in doing that, and I tell about it in The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy, especially when my marriage fell apart and everything was on the floor in shambles. Everything about the church, everything about God, everything about life was just in pieces. And I had to get down on my knees and pick up every little shard and say, is this one worth keeping? Or do I throw it away?
Yeah.
And I threw away a lot, and I kept them. And I think everybody should feel that they have the position in God's family to do that for themselves.
Absolutely think that's crucial. Very, very important. Katie, anything else on this topic?
Well, you're answering a lot of the questions that the listeners had about writing these books. There was one more that I wanted to read because I think this sums up what maybe some people might be thinking right now. Because we've talked about polygamy, we've talked about your book. You're an LGBTQ ally. This comes from Emily, and she says, Carol Lynn Pearson is seriously one of my very favorite people on the planet. I would love to honestly know how she reconciles her faith. She is very bold in declaring her belief about polygamy being wrong, as well as LGBTQ stances in the church. But yet somehow she remains faithful in the gospel, and I really want to know how she does it. She is the most open-minded, loving of all people, rebellious, feminist, progressive Mormon I have ever known, and I freaking love her for it. I have so much love and adoration. I can't wait to hear this interview. How would you respond to that?
Well, thank you. Thank you for all of that, of course. And well, I just hold to the things that I know are true and useful. And I find a lot in the church that is true and useful. I right now I'm doing, our ministry to the women, and I've got 5 women that and I think I'm probably one of the few that regularly phones or visits in person, goes for walks with my women, and my Relief Society president loves me. But these are the things that I know are right and useful and good. If I were called to do something about getting people ready for re-embracing polygamy, I'd have to say, thank you. No, that's not on my list of things that I am called to do. But I just know what, and never mind, what the bishop calls you to do. What does God call you to do? And you can do. God can call you to do things anywhere, at the grocery store, at wherever you are, in whatever circle you are in. And I know it is confusing for a lot of people who have changed their paradigm in terms of truth. And in terms of absolute fact. But if you can manage the facts as you learn them, and say, this is still my home. I still find Christ here in a lot of ways, and I still find that I can learn and serve here, and then create a place by yourself that is kind of using your own gifts and not doing anything shocking, but doing it to push along the things that you believe in. Leave the things that you don't believe in, leave them home. But the things that you do believe in, and I love to watch the young men in our ward with their babies. That just thrills me. I wish every child in the world could have, like the public commitment of this father blessing his child. I love those kinds of things. And the things that I don't love, I just kind of put away. And the things that I don't love, that I feel called to address, then I address them. But I've learned to do it in a way that's gracious, I think.
You have just stricken the balance that we are all searching for. And you are so wise and just say things in such a way that makes complete sense. And, I was going to say, your beautiful poem entitled Valentine, Allan and I, we do run a 6-week course where we do a workshop with couples who are going through this. And your poem, Valentine, sums up exactly what we do in 6 weeks. And so no need to take the course, guys.
Just read that poem.
Read that poem over and over again by Carol Lynn, because I think that I received so much out of that, and it resonated so much with where Allan and I are. And you just put things in such a simple, beautiful way that it's very encouraging. It's encouraging to think that we could go on living this way and finding our own truth and finding the things that we reject and that we love, and that, that we can go and present ourselves saying, this is who we are. This is how, this is how we feel. And we're here to love anyway.
Yes. You know what? I just found another little poem I want to share with you. If we can also have some kind of a sense of humor about, all these harsh, grinding things that we're having to work through. Oh, my beliefs and your beliefs. And I just happened to turn the page to this. So this little verse called Wrong, right? You are clearly wrong, and I am clearly right. But I will support your being wrong, which is clearly the right thing for me to do. Because after all, being wrong may be right for you. And it would be wrong of me to make you right. So be wrong as long as you want to. It's quite all right.
Perfect. Oh, that's great. That just fits in here as well. Thank you so much. Carol Lynn, I couldn't have imagined this going better than it has, and you are to thank for that. So thank you so much for joining us on Marriage on a Tightrope. I want to make sure that, Katie, do you have any last questions or
So
comments?
Carol Lynn, for those who would love to purchase your book, either through your website or did you say it's through Amazon, or people who want to write you an email, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. Go to my website, carolynnpearson.com, and you can send me an email there, and you can order all of the books there. There are a lot of that are out of print now, but there's plenty that are still in print that you might want to look into.
I think the coolest title of any book that you've written is I'm Still a Hot Babe, but Now It Comes in Flashes.
Yeah, and I have 2 of those little humor books. They're just compilations of silly funny things, because we do need to laugh.
Absolutely.
And, maybe humor is a sacred kind of thing. So when I offer this little verse that kind of makes us giggle and then has truth to it, if a couple ever stops laughing, then, then it's just really, really hard to get back up again. Gerald and I had a lot of fun and laughter together, and a lot of absolute anguish tears together. But whatever is in front of us, just think of this great little sweatshirt here, love anyway. And if the couple has to part because things are entirely impossible, then figure out to love anyway. But if it is possible to maintain this couplehood, to maintain the family for the sake of your own, what if the Lord really wants you to be here to learn something important from this other person? What if it's really vital that you not take the easy way out and say, oh, hey, you don't think like I do anymore. I'm done with you. What if that means you are now going back to kindergarten? What if right now you got up to 5th grade, but your spouse is now kind of pulling in a different direction? Oh, no, I liked it better down in 1st grade when it was all hugs and kisses and deliciousness. Well, nobody gets to stay in 1st grade forever. You can't do that. I love the LDS phrase, eternal progression. And I really think everything that comes into our lives, if we use it with some measure of intelligence and love, can be a step in our eternal education. And, so for the true believers out there, I want to beg you, do not throw away this beautiful person that you fell in love with because he or she now has a different world view or a different view of heaven. I just don't think Jesus would want that. That's not a solution. That's not a solution. So let us just put love first. Love anyway.
Thank you again, Carol Lynn. That's a great message to end the episode on. We, again, would direct people to carolynpearson.com. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. I have had such a good time.
Oh, good. That's so great.
Blessings to all of us.